Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Rob Sievertson. I'm from the Service Department of Schneider Electric Solar Business, and I'll be showing you how to upgrade the firmware on your Conext devices today. So first off, just a reminder that this webinar is not a replacement for your owner's guides or any of the instruction material that comes with the product. This equipment is intended to be serviced by qualified personnel. Qualified personnel are those that have had experience and training in how to service electrical equipment that is operating at voltages up to 1,000 volts or that have other solar equipment training. So our agenda today, in the next 30 minutes, we'll get you comfortable with upgrading the firmware on your Conext series inverters, charge controllers, and accessories. We're going to cover an introduction to firmware. What is firmware? Why you would want to upgrade and how to find the firmware on our website, how to find the Conext Gateway or the Conext Combox on the network and view the current firmware version, and how to transfer firmware to the Gateway or Combox and then upgrade the devices on the network. And finally, we'll look at common issues and how to recover from them. Firmware is a type of software that provides the low-level control of hardware on your Conext devices. Originally, it was programmed into one-time programmable ICs or UV erasable read-only memory chips. On those devices, upgrading the firmware required replacement ICs to be installed in the control board. An example of this type of technology is the Trace SW. It had windowed ICs, and in order to do a firmware upgrade, you had to provide replacement ICs to it. So on the left here, we have a windowed IC. We have a couple different versions as well that are one-time programmable, but typically they were UV erasable and they would have a sticker over the window. So to allow the IC to operate normal use, when you wanted to reprogram it, you had to take the IC out of the circuit, pull the sticker off the window, apply a dose of UV radiation, usually from a black light, and then put a new sticker on and reprogram the IC. Later, as EEPROM, which was electrically erasable and programmable read-only memory technology, became cheaper and more widely available, it became the norm to distribute updates and firmware updates and fixes to customers that could be installed on their old devices. Today, it is commonplace for your cell phone or computer to download new updates that allow you to take photos in the dark or to patch security vulnerabilities in the design of the CPU. The Conext series of battery-based inverters, chargers, and accessories all contain EEPROM and are all field upgradable. So the first step is that we need to get the latest firmware for the Conext MPPT60 charge controller. So first, let's navigate to the solar website. And then we go into products, off-grid products and backup, inverter chargers, Conext XW 12240. Once the page loads, we go to the download section and click on firmware. And then you can click on the appropriate firmware for your device. So once you've downloaded the firmware from our website, you're able to go and check the device to see if the device is up to date. So for this part, you'll need to navigate to the gateway to get to the device information page. So here, we're going to first install a USB drive in the gateway so that we can get the IP address of our gateway, so we can open up the local web page. And we wait until it beeps twice. Once the device beeps twice, then you can remove the USB drive out of the gateway, put it in your computer, and you'll open the HTML file that's on the drive. Once you navigate there, we'll open up the gateway page. You'll log in and click on Devices, and then click on the device that you want to check, in this case an MPPT60, and the firmware version is down on the bottom right where it says build number. So on the Combox, from the System Performance page, go to System Devices, click on the MPPT60, and the fourth line from the top will show you the version number of the firmware on this device. So now installing firmware. Installing firmware on your device is very straightforward. The first thing you need to do is to make sure your local network has reliable power. If your router loses power during the upgrade, you will lose your connection to the gateway. Do not reboot the gateway. It's still working in the background, but this is one of our most common complaints, is that a customer has powered their router off of the critical load panel on the XW Plus. When they put the system into standby to do the upgrade, they lose power to their router, and then the web page stops showing on their screen. At that point, they go into a bit of a panic, and they start trying to reboot the gateway or the Combox, assuming that it has locked up on them. So this is why we request that whenever you're doing a firmware upgrade, your first step should always be to put your system into bypass mode. Putting your system into bypass is straightforward. In your mini PDP, you just turn off the output breaker, and then you turn on the bypass breaker. And they're interlocked so that you can't ever have them both on at the same time. Now on the gateway, navigate to your device page, the firmware page, select upgrade, and navigate to the XFO file that you just downloaded a few minutes ago, and then choose load. The firmware upgrade will take 5 to 10 minutes. In this example, I've sped it up quite a bit so that it goes by pretty quickly, but at this point, it's just a matter of waiting. Your system will be in standby at this point, so any devices that might be powered on the output of your inverter, will lose power if you haven't put it into bypass, which is why we asked that and showed it at first. So once we're finished here, I'll take you on to the next step to show you how to do this with a Combox. It's a little bit different. The gateway is newer and we've simplified the upgrade process. The Combox is an older system and has a two-step firmware upgrade process to try and make it clear that the file transfer is independent of the upgrade. So as you approach the end of the firmware upgrade here, your MPPT is currently showing that it is upgrading firmware. It's going to reboot now, and then it's going to come back into online mode just at the very end. And this can take a couple of minutes because it takes time for the device to reboot. And so we're back into online. The system's going to make sure it's all running, and then it'll give us a notice that the firmware upgrade is complete. And so on the bottom right here, you can see your new version number under build number, and everything's ready to go. On the Combox, what we're going to do is go into Combox configuration, go into upload, and here this is where we first need to transfer the file to the Combox. So we're going to click on upload a file to Combox, select our firmware file, and then select upload. And then it's going to take a minute for the firmware to transfer from your computer onto the Combox. And this allows us to do the firmware upgrade to the device in the background, regardless of whether your internet connection or your network connection is working. So once the file is transferred over, go into this second drop-down list and choose the device to upgrade, and we'll narrow down the firmware available that's on the Combox. Choose the latest version, choose upgrade. It'll give you a warning about the system going to standby and losing power. So again, make sure you're on bypass, and then choose upgrade. And the time to do the firmware upgrade on the gateway and the Combox is about the same. So I've sped this up as well, so the video goes by quite a bit faster than the real upgrade. So once we get to the end, that last few percentage points is where the device is rebooting. Once you get this message, device upgrade complete, then you can go back to your system devices, take a look at your MPPT homepage, and here again from the fourth line from the top, you can see the new version number loaded into the charge controller. And our last our topic is common issues and how to recover from them. The most common issue you'll have, as I said before, is losing the power to your router. Don't panic when this happens. The upgrade is still going on in the background as long as your gateway or your Combox still have power. So the best thing you can do in those situations is just wait 5 or 10 minutes. Quite likely the firmware upgrade will complete in the background. The system will come back out of standby and you'll be back and the lights will come back on, or the router will come back on. What we want to avoid is trying to reboot the Combox or the gateway at this point, because that will cause a lost connection or a bad firmware upgrade and leave you with equipment that will not operate until you go back and recover it. So if we go here, I'll show you how to do this, how we can break a unit, how we can break a firmware upgrade. So if we go into upgrade and then choose the firmware and open, on this device, I pull the plug very quickly into the process, but I actually don't reboot the gateway. So this will let me very quickly recover from a bad firmware upgrade. So at 5%, here's where I've pulled the ZAN bus cable out of the gateway. It'll take a few minutes for the gateway to realize that it's lost connection to the charge controller. And then once it does, so we've popped into bootloader mode. Sorry, I guess I hadn't unplugged it yet. Popped into bootloader, there we had unplugged it. Firmware upgrade had failed. So at this point, to recover, because the gateway still knows what the MPPT60 is, we can just try another download and it will happily recover. We'll put the system back into standby. We'll start transferring the file over and the charge controller will get its firmware properly installed on it. So again, this is sped up greatly just so that we're not spending a lot of time watching it. It could be about 5 to 6 minutes for each device. You can upgrade multiple devices at once, as long as they're all of the same device type. So if you have multiple charge controllers, you can send the firmware to all the charge controllers at the same time. So here, as we get to the end of the upgrade process, we're going to recover. It's going to finish the upgrade. We see the charge controller come back online and it's operating. So now I'll show you the same thing on the Combox. The Combox, I can actually go one step further and I can actually get the charge controller stuck into a bootloader mode, which is even more, it's not more difficult, it's a different and more common error. So here we are on the Combox. If we go into upload, and then we choose our charge controller, and then choose a firmware file. Again, I'm looking at the 2 firmware files that are stored on the Combox. And start the upgrade. So quickly in this stage, what I'm actually going to do is remove the ZAN bus cable, which is powering the Combox. In the previous example, the gateway was powered by a wall adapter. And so when I removed the ZAN bus cable, it continued to run. In this example, my Combox is powered by the ZAN bus network. And when I remove the ZAN bus cable, the Combox is actually going to turn off and I'm going to lose all connection to it. And I think it's right around here that I pulled the power out. So it should just take a minute for the browser to realize it's lost connection. And so here, the browser now tells me it's lost the connection to the Combox. That's because my Combox has actually been turned off. I'm speeding up this part. It takes a few minutes when I repower on the Combox. It takes about 3-4 minutes for the Combox to come back on. First thing you should do, obviously, is to try and restore power to your Combox. It'll take a few minutes. The device you were upgrading will be stuck in what we call bootloader mode, where the actual firmware is gone. But it does have the base bootloader that lets it load new firmware on it. So I'll log into the Combox here, and we'll go back to the devices page. I think I go straight to the devices page. So if we go to our devices here, you can see that there's no charge controller in the list. And that's because our charge controller only knows that it's a charger, but it doesn't broadcast any other information about itself. So to correct this, we go into the device upgrades. We select the one that says charger and has a unique ID after it. It looks really different than the rest. And because it doesn't know what its part number is, we'll have to select the correct part number and the correct firmware. Always check the FGA number on the side of the device before you do an upgrade. It's possible if you put the incorrect firmware on there, it could lead to unpredictable behavior. In my experience, the device actually rejects the incorrect firmware. So my best advice is check the label on the side of the unit, get the correct FGA version, then choose the correct firmware to load onto it. As you can see here, I've sped this up again as well, but it will load the device firmware on it. And once the firmware completes, the device will be recognized as usual on the devices page. So we've completed the firmware here. My charge controller is rebooting. So if you go to the system devices page, your charge controller will show up as a charge controller in the list of system devices. And I think that's everything. So I just wanted to say thank you for joining me today to learn how to upgrade the firmware on your Conext series of devices. Next time you're commissioning a system, you'll be able to help ensure your customer has the most stable and up-to-date firmware from the start. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking your time out today to join me for this.